Hello, everybody. I hope everyone can hear me and see me. This is Lena from Colourful Heart. We'd like to apologize to you that we've begun very late. We've had some technical glitches, and but the trouble's been resolved. So please let us know. Send us emails if you can't see us or watch us or hear us. The machine's been very weird today, so we're very sorry. I'd like to welcome you to Colourful Heart's webinar about non-Japanese LGBTQ in Japan and the minority stress that they face. For those of you who are not familiar with Colourful Heart, we're a Tokyo-based nonprofit organization that focuses on mental health issues amongst the LGBTQ community. This is our first English seminar that aims to cover the issue of mental health amongst non-Japanese LGBTQ+ who live in our community in Japan. In the first half of the session, a guest speaker and I will each give presentations about today's topics. And then in the latter half, we will have a discussion giving you specific examples about issues expats that live in Japan face and difficulties that impact their mental health. So first of all, I, Lena Kawazu, would like to give you an introductory overview of the ethnically diverse society we live in today in Japan, and explain to you in details about what Colourful Heart is doing in aim to support the non-Japanese LGBTQ+ that live in Japan. So just to give you a quick self-intro, I'm Colourful Heart's volunteer staff and the facilitator of our English peer support meeting. I consider myself as gender fluid and have been an active member in Tokyo's LGBTQ community throughout the past decade. Prior to coming to Tokyo, I lived in Melbourne, Australia, as you may be able to tell by my accent, where I grew up in an all-girls Christian boarding school. I work as a translator by day, and I'm also a writer, and I consider myself as a third culture person. So I'd like to begin my presentation, if I can share my screen with you. There we go. At least that worked. So I'd like to start off by explaining to you about what our organization, Colourful Heart, does in a little more details. So we'll give you a better idea. At Colourful Heart, we organize activities that can be categorized into two groups. One is our peer support meeting. This is a self-help group that meets monthly by different sexuality and gender segments. We gather together to share the worries and pains that we can share only to our LGBTQ peers. And we talk about how to recover together. We call this self-help group Colourful Meeting. The other activity is holding study sessions and seminars through seminars about LGBTQ mental health, such as this one. Through these events, we aim to address the broad health and well-being issues that and the needs of LGBTQ people. These events are targeted towards not only to people in the LGBTQ community, but also towards medical and welfare professionals. We currently host 4 different Colourful meetings. One is for people who consider themselves as queer women and non-binary. We've got another one for queer men. Unfortunately, we don't have the transgender meeting at the moment. It's on hiatus. The reason being that we don't have a volunteer transgender member at the moment. But the trans people, those of you who are interested in joining Colourful Heart meetings, they may come to the LGBTQ mix meeting that is held bi-monthly. And today, in today's topics, we'd like to focus on the English speakers meetings. The first 4 meetings that I mentioned are held in Japanese only, but we have one English speakers meeting, which welcomes all people regardless of their gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, race, ethnic, or national origins, creed, race, age, whatever. So I'd like to explain to you why we started the English speaking group to begin with. The answer is simple, because not one single support group existed, especially for international LGBTQ community in Japan that we sort of know of. Well, I'm saying in terms of mental health support. And that's even in Tokyo. So we thought, we must create one. In recent years, we keep on hearing Japanese media and politicians say that we should create a multicultural society, or more technically, multicultural symbiotic society. The reason for this is that the number of foreigners living in Japan has been on the rise in the recent years, as you can see on this graph. In 2020, obviously, we've had the pandemic, so the number has decreased a little bit. But since late 90s, the number of non-Japanese living in Japan has been on the rise. The number is expected to continue to increase in the future due to many factors such as economic globalization, aging population, and declining population. Sorry, for some reason I'm not sharing the slides with you, as someone has mentioned. What is going on? Is this better? Sorry, so this is the graph I was talking about. So the population of foreign residents living in Japan has been in the increase in the recent years, and the number is expected to rise in the future. So what is multicultural symbiotic society, as they say? The definition, as the Japanese policymakers have put it, is society where people of different nationalities and ethnicities can live together while recognizing each other's cultural differences and trying to build an equal relationship. So basically, the aim is to accept non-Japanese residents as members of Japanese society and try to establish a prosperous society where people of diverse nationalities and ethnic backgrounds can demonstrate their individual cultural identities. Okay, but is Japan really becoming multicultural? That is a question I'd like to ask. In reality, in my opinion, we have a long way to go to achieve this so-called multicultural symbiotic society. Today in 2022, Japan still can be a very difficult place to live for many non-Japanese for the following reasons. We have language barrier, cultural barrier for non-speakers of Japanese and non-Japanese and people who weren't brought up in Japan. Lack of information is another big factor. We'll go through specific examples later on, but there are lack of information in multicultural, in multilingual languages, which is a big issue in for the non-Japanese. And also, I think there is a national consensus amongst the Japanese that Japan is still a homogenous monoracial society, and they just don't realize the needs of non-Japanese people. So these are the factors I think that is hindering Japan to become more multicultural still, and we'll talk about more in the latter half of the session today. Things get more complicated when you add the intersectionality of being LGBTQ plus to being a racial minority. Regardless to say, Japan is still a country that is intolerant towards LGBTQ compared to some of the more developed parts of the world. Lack of information in foreign languages on the social, institutional, and legal status of LGBTQ people in Japan. There are no laws against LGBTQ discrimination, nor are there any systems that protect the rights of LGBTQ couples. Many people are unsure of how to live in a country that does not recognize the rights of LGBTQ people. There is a lack of, as I said, information in foreign languages for LGBTQ and information on where they can live, eat, gather together, medical resources, counseling resources, welfare information, and other important stuff. And there are also very few groups and places and communities for foreign LGBTQ people. And this is a big problem. There are communities in Japan that caters for LGBTQ community, and they're not really excluding specifically the foreigners. They're not intentionally exclusive or xenophobic, but they just don't know how to approach non-Japanese speaking or non-Japanese cultural persons. Thus, they tend not to open up their doors to the multicultural crowd. And another issue that is often overlooked is that some of these non-Japanese LGBTQ plus people that live in Japan do not have a safe space to themselves, even in the community of people from their own home country, because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. For example, a gay man from China may have to hide the fact that he's gay, as many in China, many people in Chinese society still think of being gay as a taboo. We'll talk about this a little bit more later on. So these kind of problems, it's not difficult to imagine that there are so many non-Japanese LGBTQ plus who find it hard to live under difficult circumstances and develop mental health problems. There are many evidence that show people that belong in multiple minority groups are more likely to expose to experiences of stigmatization and discrimination and suffer minority stress. So let's look at this diagram. For instance, a non-Japanese trans person with mental health issues may experience racism and ableism within the LGBTQ community, homophobia and ableism within their own ethnic community, and homophobia and racism from mental health support community and many other essential areas of life, such as housing, employment, healthcare, and education. And as you can see, limited resources and support are available for people in multiple minority groups. It is thus extremely important for a person that belongs in multiple minority groups to be provided a safe place where their unique and important identities are understood. So in conclusion, I would like to sum up by stating that our society lacks perspective to recognize non-Japanese as a part of the community. And also Japan is still a society that only cares for the cis-het citizens. What this means in combination is this. In Japan, the existence of non-Japanese LGBTQ plus people is not assumed both socially and within the LGBTQ community. We at Colourful Heart believe that there is an urgent need for a support system for this unassumed non-Japanese minority. And so you can get more information about Colourful Heart from our website if you need support, or from our Facebook page. Please get connected to us if there's any information that you'd like. So here's our URL and our QR code. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. And now I'd like to introduce you to our special guest, Taeko Yamada, MSW, who will give us a professional take on the implications of mental health issues faced by non-Japanese individuals living in Japan. Taeko is a bilingual, English-Japanese bilingual social worker who has practiced in Australia and Japan since 2007. She's also qualified in family therapy and is a certified hypnotherapist and trainer. Taeko is a member of the Australian Association of Social Workers, the Japanese Society of Gender Identity Disorder, the National Guild of Hypnotists, and the American Board of Hypnotherapy. Currently, she works for TEL Japan as a psychotherapist. She also volunteers as a board member at the International Federation of Equality Day and as a volunteer staff at Nijiro Kazoku in her attempt to support the international and LGBTQ plus communities in Japan. So I'll pass the baton to Taeko. I'll just close my presentation and open hers. Okay, so here's Taeko.
The presentation ready. Okay, I hope you can see me okay. So shall we share the screen? So that's presentation is tech issues. Just one moment.
Sorry. I think
Okay.
this should work.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Hang on. I don't think the presentation's shared yet. So let me just.
Okay, I hope
There
you
you
can see
go.
the presentation okay now. Okay, thank you for the introduction and for inviting me today to the first, I think this is the first English speaking study session at Colourful Heart. My name is Taeko, and I work as a psychotherapist at an organization called Tell Japan, which is a non-profit mental health organization that supports the international community here in Japan. The majority of my clients are based in the Kanto region currently, but many people live in other cities, major cities of Japan, and also some are living in the remote areas of Japan. And mostly they come from English-speaking backgrounds, America, UK, Australia, India, and Singapore. But I have some clients coming from European backgrounds as well, and some Asian backgrounds. And Japanese returnees and Nikkei Brazilian, etc. Yeah, currently my it's not the same case for other clinicians, but I have 50 to 60% of LGBTQ identifying clients personally, because of my experience in this field, and also my interest in this field as well. Okay, I'll just move the slide to the next one. Okay, so for today, I would like to cover these topics: cultural adjustment, intersectionality, that was already covered by Lena a bit earlier, but I might just talk just briefly about this topic as well. And hopefully you can, it's interesting and enough and helpful and practical for the audience. And I would like to cover, mental health challenges and resources that for us to make sense of our common experiences as LGBTQ plus identifying people, and also clarify some of the challenges we face on a daily basis. So today's theme is LGBTQ plus minority stress. And this probably is a very familiar feeling for many LGBTQ identifying people. And it may feel like the feeling of isolation, the feeling of not being part of the majority, which can create a sense of loneliness, and some people may feel quite disempowered by this. And it's not difficult to guess that it can have a significant impact on our mental health. Okay, so as a common experience, I would like to talk about this cultural adjustment, the concept of culture shock, and culture shock is more of a familiar term, and it's also called cultural adjustment, and it looks more or less like this. 80% of newcomers go through this kind of phase, and some people may not come to the last phase of adjustment, but most people go through this in the first 6 months of arriving in a new cultural environment. And as you can see, like there's a honeymoon period and culture shock, recovery, adjustment. And in the first phase of the honeymoon period, where everything looks interesting, and you're just fascinated by all the differences that's visible in a new culture, and like you get this euphoric feeling of being in a new country. And then you go through that dip of culture shock, where the opposite might be true, like everything is difficult. You may feel quite negative about everything that happens around you, like people commenting on like how you can use chopsticks very well, and you just get sick of receiving comments like that, or so you hate everything, and why can't they, you might get the sentiment of like, why can't they do things like the UK or the US or home. So that's the phase of culture shock. And then you go through that recovery phase where the reactions to those events might not be as emotional, and you can kind of take it unpleasant, but take it and then go through that sort of adjustment period where you come to accept differences and accept the reality of being in a different culture. So it is a very common experience, and I wanted to include this topic in this presentation so that you'd know that it is a fairly common experience to have the culture shock. And then, in the LGBTQ community, there's an additional layer of being part of the subculture of LGBTQ+. And, there might be another wave of this culture shock by being LGBTQ in a foreign country. And you might have, you may get the culture shock of why Japan doesn't have legal rights for the LGBTQ people, or you might be surprised by the fact that there's no legal protection for the individuals, LGBTQ identifying individuals, or there's a total lack of same-sex marriage or recognition of your partnerships, and that leads to limitation to plan your long-term life or family. So that's an additional layer of challenge of being a minority in the minority group. So this having multiple layers of being a minority within a minority group, this complexity is commonly called intersectionality. Okay, so here's a definition of intersectionality. It is the concept that all oppression is linked, where everyone has their own unique experience of discrimination and oppression. This definition doesn't include sexuality, but obviously it's one of the important factors to consider for the purpose of this presentation. So, so that means more minority stress. Yeah. Okay. So what are the mental health challenges specifically that people face here? In terms of mental health, risk is generally greater when intersectionality or the layers of these, the stress factors are observed. Commonly anxiety, depression, social isolation, and in worst cases, suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation, unfortunately very common within the LGBTQ+ community. In the second example, I just raised this work-related matter, long hours, lack of work-life balance, self-care, short holidays as an example of how the system can exclude foreign workers. So, if you have, say, 2 weeks of annual leave per year, and many of the Japanese public holidays fall on Mondays, and you have longer weekends, and if you have family and the social life here, and that's all based in Japan, that's maybe workable. But if you have family overseas, and if you plan to visit over the Christmas period, and if it's extremely difficult to take some 3 weeks off or 4 weeks off, then that system is not really working for somebody whose life is based overseas, or who works here and has family overseas. So that's just one example of how the system can socially isolate a foreign worker. And obviously COVID has made situations much worse for the last couple of years. And at TEL, there was a 30% increase in suicidal callers, those people who had expressed suicidal thoughts. So that's a significant increase in this type of call. So COVID was a very big thing that isolated people generally. Okay, and other challenges that I thought of including were things like, counseling is generally not covered by the national health insurance, and this makes it quite difficult for people to access counseling because it might be quite costly. You don't know where to go, you don't know who to talk to find the support that's needed. And the mental health treatments are currently heavily medicated, which means that you can get the treatments from a psychiatrist using the national health insurance, but the consultations are generally short with doctors. Maybe you get half an hour for the initial session, but from the second session on, might be 10 minutes to 15 minutes to get the follow-up appointments, and that might not be sufficient for to gain skills like coping skills and not empowering for the patients generally. The changes happened over the last 10-15 years, but generally speaking, I think this kind of pattern is observed still in the Japanese mental health system. Okay. So in response to the mental health challenges faced by the non-Japanese LGBTQ community, probably things like inclusivity, being inclusive as opposed to excluding people, might be one of the solutions. And access is, inclusivity is about access. So being inclusive is accessible. It's access to language, information, access to human resource like a staff or professional service, location that's accessible, as in you can physically get there to access a service. Cultural competence is very important as well. Like Colourful Heart provides that support for the English-speaking LGBTQ individuals by having that English-speaking session each month. So it is beyond translation, but with the knowledge of and the competence in sexual orientation and gender identity issues and supporting the non-Japanese individuals. Colourful Hearts, for example, is a culturally competent, organization that's available for the community. And this can lead to prevention of serious health consequences. So, serious health consequences by not having access, this kind of access, can include late diagnosis of all sorts of physical and mental health conditions, including like cancer. You might hesitate to access testing, STI testing, HIV testing, or you might hesitate to seek support in mental health, or you might not want to go to see a gynecologist because you just don't know, what's going to be asked of you. The doctor may assume that if you have a partner, you're in a heterosexual relationship, and having to explain that, having the fear of, coming out, fear of homophobia, transphobia, and xenophobia. That's like multiple layers of the barriers that can, prevent people from accessing services. So by removing those layers, you have more access. Therefore, that can be preventative of mental and physical health conditions. And just to give you a sort of an idea of how significant it can be in terms of mental health, about 70% of mental health conditions are diagnosed before age 24. So that means that if you hesitate to go see a doctor, or if you hesitate to seek support in mental health, then that leads to late diagnosis, late treatment, and you might, you might experience really severe symptoms before you're properly diagnosed. So yeah, by not having access to needed services, you can actually have a fairly severe consequences in your life. Okay, so Taeko Japan might be, that's where I practice most of the time. I also counsel international students and local students at Tokyo University, and I work for the AIDS Foundation here as well, but I practice mostly at TEL. And I can probably talk about Taeko Japan as a model, culturally competent model, and as an example of the comprehensive nationwide mental health service targeting the international community here. Yeah, at the counseling service, so there are there's the main services. One's a Lifeline, which is a crisis line service, and staffed by volunteer telephone counselors who go through special training to support the community. And there's a professional counseling sector where we have, I think, more than 20 therapists working who are licensed overseas and locally, and we work together in Tokyo, in Kansai, and there's a huge Okinawa team these days as well, in multiple languages. So it's primarily in English and Japanese, but we have a Spanish-speaking therapist available. I think Chinese and Indonesian are also available, so French too. There used to be a German therapist, but I don't think there is anymore. So then we have the educational workshops that normally take place in Japanese, English, and I think we've run a few sessions in Spanish as well. So yeah, community owned, like all the managers from overseas. They are coming from the community themselves, and the board members also come from the expat community too. So a majority of the board members and leadership members. So that means people like the staff and board members, the key people know the issues, know what are the concerns of the community, and that's reflected in a service delivery. So TEL receives more than 7,000 calls. Last year alone, I think 7,800, more than 7,800 calls last year, and more than 12,000 therapy sessions last year alone. But with COVID, I think the number kind of spiked. Okay, so as I mentioned before, a majority of my clients come from 50 to 60% of my clients come from the LGBTQ plus identifying population, but that means that and that's a huge percentage for me, but other clinicians obviously has a mix. There's a child therapist, there's a dance therapist. We are a big mix of different therapists. So and I'll give you that link to the website later, so you might like to look at the services that are provided by the organization later. Okay, and the concerns my clients who are LGBTQ identifying, what they bring into the sessions, many of them explore the issues like coming out to family, coming out to friends, coming out at work, and what that involves. and also gender treatments, how to transition safely, without losing a job, without disclosing too much initially, or who to see, who speaks English, who's culturally competent. All these issues just come up in many of the therapy sessions. So okay. And finally, I just want to remind everybody that help is available. So I just came up with this 3S's thing, seek help and self-care and socialize. So professional counseling is available through an organization like TEL, and also a place called IMHPJ, which is an international mental health professionals in Japan. There's a website. They list mostly foreign trained mental health professionals that are available in Japan. So you can locate a therapist if you prefer an in-person session in your area. Peer support is also available. Stonewall is an example of a peer support organization. Colourful Heart, of course, is another example. And I think there are events like, for example, Dyke Weekend it's a women's event that happens, I think, once a year, and it really supports they're big on supporting the international lesbian and women's community. Yeah. So where you feel safe, I would like you to seek help. And from there, you share thoughts, you share information, and socialize and make friends. And you can also have fun as well. And those three things are just primal in maintaining mental wellness and also building resilience. So, yeah, I think I can conclude the presentation here, and we can move on to the Q&A session. So thank you for listening. And here's the sort of links, my email, and also the link to TEL Japan if you're interested in sort of seeking more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Taeko-san. We'll take a 5-minute break now, and then we'll move on to the latter half of the session, where Taeko and I have a discussion about specific cases where LGBTQ non-Japanese have trouble adjusting in Japan. And also we have a Q&A session. You can ask your questions from a form, which is the link to the form is in the YouTube description. If you have a look at if you open up the description on the YouTube page, there's the question. So please send in the questions and we'll try to answer them as much as possible. So we'll take a 5-minute break. Welcome back to LGBTQ expats and minority stress session. We are in the second half of our session where Taeko and I are going to talk about what it means to be a minority in Japan. We're both Japanese, but we've both lived in other countries, so we know what it feels like to be a racial and ethnic minority. So we'll
Tech issues.
okay, tech issue. Okay. I hope you can hear us all right. Turn this off. please let us know if you can't hear us or there's problems. So what was I talking about? Yeah. So because we've both been racial and ethnic minorities in another country, we can sort of relate, not entirely, because Japan has its specific issues, but we'll try to dissect what problems there are. And through my experience as a facilitator for Colourful Hearts English meeting, and Taeko's experience as a psychotherapist for the international community, we'll try to sort of tell you what difficulties exist and what impacts they have on mental health issues, right? So one of the things that the people who come to Colourful Heart meetings mention is lack of information. And I think
that's a big one.
It's a big one. It's life and death, really, because like it's not even LGBTQ related, but some of the things like crisis maps when there's earthquake or flood, they're not localized. I mean, translated into other languages well. What do you think about that?
The lack of interpreting services was. We did another talk recently about a similar issue, and the lack of interpreting and translation services was one of the things that we identified as something that was really like it was everywhere. Like government services generally would offer a service like that in Australia, for example. Of course, it's a migrant country, but even then the support was like visible and obvious, and it was in every single document that they were handing out. Even if it was in English, there was a sign that was at the end of each paperwork, each flyer, whatever that is.
I think in more developed countries, the existence of non-English speakers or foreign language speakers are assumed, whereas in Japan, non-Japanese speakers are not assumed. So they just don't. It doesn't click to them to make a special website or proper international website for people who may not speak Japanese. And like recently I had a friend who contacted me because they wanted to book their COVID vaccine, and they couldn't because the website wasn't translated into English very well. It was very enigmatic website. It was really hard to get through and hard to see where you can get where you can make booking from. So that kind of hard difficulty accessing information is very problematic.
Accessibility to information was one of the things I mentioned in the presentation too. But by not having that, there are like really severe consequences. The crisis situations is an obvious thing, like a COVID injection. That's like a very good example. But just like not having access to, say, free cancer screening. Every person here receives a little postcard, that gives you that opportunity to go for a test, and that's obviously not translated. And
not so many non-Japanese people in Japan don't actually know that they get to have free pap smear or free
information available.
There's no information available.
So what happens is that you'd have to rely on your personal resources, like where there's an absence of that public, like governmental kind of support. So you're bringing your partner to medical appointments or your colleague to checkup, and of course that would, it can be awkward, right? So if you're bringing a child and at the gynecologist, obviously you don't want to talk about your last, sexual contact with somebody, or if you want to get tested for STIs, obviously you can't bring a colleague into that space. So yeah, that absence of that professional support, the publicly funded support is a really, I think it's quite crippling in some areas. And like things like seeing a gynecologist, doing the HIV testing, stuff like that. That's just, it's really, really, really relevant in the LGBTQ space.
Yeah. Of course, there are medical interpreters that you can use, but when you're an LGBTQ plus identifying person, sometimes it's not easy using those interpreters, is it?
Yeah, if you come from a very small community where everybody,
like there's an example about this man, a gay man from a particular Asian country. He was HIV positive, and he was living in Japan. He needed access to HIV medical support, obviously, but because he did not want to come out to the interpreter, the Chinese interpreter, oops, I said the country name, Chinese interpreter, that he was gay. He wasn't, he couldn't get access to the particular treatment that he wanted. And again, that's life and death situation, only because he feared that the interpreter might tell the small, Chinese community in Japan that that person is gay. I mean, he might not, but there's a fear. There's fear of stigmatization within the transphobia. Yeah. So that's really,
that's the minority stress that people have.
So that's a two-layer minority stress. So we really don't have that many medical professionals in Japan who are well trained about LGBTQ issues, and that's another problem, I think.
There is a good organization or group of medical professionals called Nijiro doctors, rainbow doctors, and they're getting a profile in the community now, but still, in terms of supporting the non-Japanese, LGBTQ community, I think there's I don't know if there's a capacity to sort of include that.
Or we'll need support, more resources within the community for that. So I guess
that's they need to sort of catch up on that sort of aspect.
Another thing that I don't think you mentioned enough in your presentation, I didn't, is the city and rural divide. So
okay,
I think that's pretty big for LGBTQ plus identifying people. People who live in Tokyo or Osaka, we have Nichome, or Osaka has Toyama, where LGBTQ people gather, and there are shops and restaurants and bars and sources of information, tools of communication. But in rural parts of Japan, there are none. Some places have absolutely nothing, although there are online resources. Many places there's just no human contact with another LGBTQ persons, and people get lonely.
Yeah. So we started to see clients from rural areas using the online therapy, since the onset of COVID, and probably you're running online groups more often since this whole pandemic started. So that's that community in the rural areas has become more visible, and I guess that the COVID, one positive thing about COVID is that it's really increased that visibility, and also gave us a chance to catch up on the infrastructure to provide support for the rural areas. So,
well, it's good for us. It's good for them to sort of get to contact us, I guess. But once, when it comes to access to information about, say, things like HIV treatment, PrEP, PEP, hormone treatment for trans people, that's pretty difficult, right? If you lived in, say, outskirts of Kyushu somewhere.
Most of the clinics are city-based. There are some major hospitals. If you're receiving the treatments for HIV, I think the hospitals will cover most of the country. There are Kyoten Byoin in each region, but in terms of transitioning, like medically as a trans person, long travels are often expected, I think. When they're trying to access from their location.
So that's that particular specifically LGBTQ issue.
Many people find it just easier to travel to Tokyo or to Osaka and fly in to access, whatever the services they need. Just because even if there's a service nearby, they may not be culturally competent. They may not, you may really struggle with the language. And day-to-day language is very different from, a medical language, for example. So you may be coping okay on a daily basis, just getting by. But when it comes to going to see somebody for a hormone treatment, for example, that's it can be quite tricky.
Just to change the subject a little bit, there are some people who find living in Japan quite suffocating. Going back to what you said about cultural adjustment, the culture shock, Japan is very still a homogenous monolith country, or so we think we are. And I think it makes some people very sort of hesitant to continue on living in Japan, and I think it's a common problem that people have. The fact that people have to read the air, reading the air is a big thing in Japan. I think it's very difficult for people who haven't been brought up in Japan to sort of adjust to that idea of
the cultural conformity,
that kind of stuff. So how can people overcome that?
So you might remember that sort of, you go through the honeymoon period, and then you go through the culture shock, and go back up to the, adaptation recovery phase. Some people never get to that adaptation phase. It's just don't, like, I think the statistics was like 5% of those who go through the process, the stages of culture shock, just don't get to that point. And that's fair. That's fair. I think adaptation, I think I mentioned about acceptance, accepting the differences, the fact that you're different, each person's different, or each culture is different and unique. Some of the practices are unique to them, but not to me, kind of thing. Like, if there's a degree of acceptance and separation, setting the boundaries at some point that may help reach that point of adaptation. Yeah, or recovery, I guess.
And in terms of speaking of which, the topic of coming out in Japan, because of the Japanese culture, you know, we sort of tend not to talk about private lives, and you know, being identifying as LGBTQ plus is still sort of, it's not frowned upon, but you're seen as a little bit weird, right? When you come out to say your colleagues or your friends. And some people find it extremely uncomfortable not being able to be themselves, because being yourself is an important
living life in full as you are.
It's a huge part of being happy, but many people just can't achieve that because they have to hide what they are.
Yeah, that's very stressful. Very stressful, and that's exactly the main thing of being a minority, like carrying that stress of being a minority, the minority stress, right? So you can't live as like who you are, who you really are. Like you have to pretend that you have, say, you're in a heterosexual relationship, and you have an intention to marry the opposite sex, and you know that's a huge pressure to carry. Like when it's just simply not who you are.
And there's always that internalized misogyny and internalized racism and sexism that comes with.
That's very stressful as well. Like internalized homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, that kind of thing. It's all part of that. You know, you may it might be a real experience, it might be the sort of overheard experience, and you get something like something like a transferred trauma from other people. Like you hear your friends going through, a traumatic event like a discrimination, and you kind of take it as your own experience. Like it's a fairly common thing as part of the minority as well, because it can happen to me anytime, like that feeling. So being on edge like that constantly, like feeling that level of anxiety is not really sustainable for our mental health.
It's not. Because you're constantly reminded of it. That's right, because that's who you are, but the country just simply doesn't allow you to sort of live the way you are. How are we going with the time? Good. And lack of sort of legal support, legal protection is another big thing that can make someone, anxious, leave someone anxious.
It's devastating. It's simply a violation of human rights.
It is.
Like you can't buy a property, you can't get married, you can't, have kids. Like there's a certain sort of time and place where you can do that, right? So that life planning is just
it's impossible, right? Well,
it might be possible. There are lots of families here, so there are ways, but it's not like if say one partner gets sick and hospitalized and needs authorization of a sort of
for surgery,
surgery or something, and then the partner of 25, 30 years can't sign that document just because the partnership is not recognized here, which is just, it's just.
Yeah, I had that because my girlfriend had a surgery, a minor one, but, a surgery last year, and I wasn't allowed to sign the agreement form. So
it's a very common experience that the community really experience. And it shouldn't be taken as something that's, that's acceptable. It's not acceptable. So yeah.
So what can we do when we feel sad about it and when we feel angry or what's the best solution?
So those three S's, right?
Right.
Of course, the legal, the lobbying and the political action is what's needed. On top of that, but socialize with your peers who experience similar, sentiments and support each other. Supporting somebody or helping others can be a healing process as well. And it can be an empowering process too. So there's that self-care, like taking it easy, recognizing that the life is hard. There's a lot of stress involved in living the life as LGBTQ plus. So recognizing that, so accepting that, fact that it's difficult, that might that's part of self-care. Yeah. And seek help. Yeah, like there are like groups like Colourful Heart. TEL is hopefully one of the useful ones for the community. And yeah, Nijiro doctors, they're pretty good in sort of supporting the community, like if you reach out. And what else is there? The immediate kind of
Stonewall,
Stonewall
has a network.
Facebook, their Facebook group is fantastic. Like,
Even if the group is not in your local area, we have a certain, we have networks of people who can help, who may be able to help you in your region. So please contact us at Colourful Heart if there's if you're looking for any support. We don't do counseling because we're not medical practitioners or we're not professional counselors, but what we can do is connect you to the resources that we have. And I think that's one of the biggest solutions that we have as people in the community to help others, is to utilize the network that we have and share that information.
Definitely. And connection is what makes us stronger. And when there's that lack of connection, if you don't feel connected to the community, if you don't feel connected to the family or the friends or the people that are surrounding us, even if there are lots of people around us, if you don't feel connected to them, then that can make you feel very lonely and isolated. So connection is what can make us, stronger.
And I think we have to attempt to help non-Japanese LGBTQ identifying people within our community. I think as the LGBTQ community as a whole have to recognize the needs of non-Japanese people and try to set up a network of resources that can help them. I think that's really important. Multilingual services, people who are willing to open up their doors to non-Japanese people. Like, language is not mandatory. It's just that, if they're willing to sort of take in non-Japanese people, that's, that'll be great, right?
And also it's everyone's business.
It is everyone's business.
It is everyone's business. It's not some kind of favor that, the mainstream community is doing for a minority. It is everyone's business. And like, every person has a right to live life fully, and that's violated, as simple as that.
So please get connected to whatever resources that you may have, or us, or TEL, whatever. Yes. So networking, promoting, educating is what we can do as a community to help those in need.
Like, this is a fantastic kind of opportunity, really. It's the first English speaking, live seminar on YouTube, and I hope to see like many more of these happening in the near future.
And I think that those people who are watching today, not all of them are LGBTQ identifying people, but they may be allies who want to help the non-Japanese LGBTQ plus. What kind of tips can you give them? Say, they're medical interpreters who want to help out LGBTQ plus.
Okay. Okay. I guess like hearing the voices, hear the voices of the the needs, like pick that up and try to relate on a personal level by identifying your own sexual orientation and gender. Kind of look at say if you're in the health field, something you can look at is like how you can use a pronoun, how you can change the file name to reflect on the true identity, like that kind of stuff.
And I think also something simple like wearing a rainbow badge helps, just to show that you support the LGBTQ persons and that you're an ally. That makes us so much more approachable to not just medical interpreters, but we're talking about doctors and nurses and
shopkeepers,
anyone, anyone who's really
rainbow stickers
and
rainbow flags.
Maybe if you can speak another language, a little Union Jack or something, American flag, whatever accent you have. I think just reaching out, show your support. If you're watching, if you're watching from like regional areas and you work in a say the local government, maybe set up put a little rainbow flag on the reception or something. The LGBTQ community will love that.
Yeah, because it's the fear of transphobia, it's a fear of homophobia, it's a fear of xenophobia, and you just don't know by looking at somebody, what they think of you, right? And by having a rainbow, like okay, this person's safe to talk to. This person's like have some level of awareness of the LGBTQ issues, and that can create a safer place for everybody, really.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you for that. I'm sure there are lots and lots of more topics that we can talk about, but I think we should go to Q&A. Let's see what questions we have. Okay. So this one's for you.
Me?
Yep. Oh no, hang on, it's not. So what are the nice ways to recover soon when we feel exhausted mentally? You mentioned 3 S's, but if you can give more sort of specific tips in terms of what we can do, that'll be great.
Okay. Talking to somebody, picking up the phone to speak to somebody or chat, friends, family, and also like doing things that are nice physically, like meditating, exercising, having a nice bath, having a sort of burn a sort of aroma oil candle, whatever that makes you feel good and you feel like you're taking care of yourself, and that feeling, the good feeling, can help, I guess, if that's not the cure, probably. Yeah, and then connect with people, find connection.
Places like Colourful Heart, it's a good place for people to meet like-minded people who are in similar situations. If it wasn't for pandemic, we have regular parties and hanami and Christmas parties and things like that. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to hold any of that for the past 2 years, but fingers crossed, we'll start it again. So yeah, just
Yeah, I'd love to come to the Hanami
Yeah.
party.
please do come. Okay, another question. Many years ago, I tried therapy in Japan with a non-Japanese therapist. I also tried therapy overseas remotely, but I gave up as soon as I soon realized that they had little or no awareness of the difference between TCKs, or third culture kids, and expat foreigners. And this person who's asking the question is a third culture kid. This was some time ago though, and I now have found a TCK therapist, though she is not LGBTQ, which can be barrier to some things I want to discuss. Is there a better understanding now in Japan amongst therapists, both local and overseas, of the deeper issues of TCKs, especially those that have never been able to find themselves in a culture they were fully accepted in? So is the notion of TCK, is it mainstream in the
At TEL at least.
At TEL?
Yeah,
Okay.
TEL at least. There are lots of people who grew up, attending international schools and struggle with the mainstream ways of doing things sometimes, or that's not like local residents, right? And then also like people who have lived in many different places because of their parents work, or so that's a fairly common thing that comes up for many of our, like, not just the clients but volunteers and staff members as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I consider myself to be a TCK as well, because I grew up in Melbourne, and so and I do think that we have different issues and totally different just the vectors of the problems that we have are different altogether, I think. So it's nice to know that TEL actually addresses the issue and knows about it, and yeah, maybe we could do a TCK workshop or something at Colourful Heart one day.
That'd be interesting.
That'll be interesting. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Okay, this person is having trouble fitting to the Japanese way of life. What would be the best way to adjust culturally?
That's a difficult question. That's a difficult question, but
it's a question that a lot of people
I think the more
are facing.
The more you try to engage in the culture, the more you try to be Japanese, you get this wall at some point, and that causes a lot of frustrations. As you speak more Japanese, have more Japanese friends, you have more frustrations because of this kind of block. And I think once again, I'll come back, like refer to that cultural adjustment, the stages of culture shock and the cultural adjustment. And when you come up from the culture shock to recovery and adaptation, like you come to accept differences. So it might be the acceptance of, say, different cultural practices. Okay, I'm Christian. I'm not Shinto, but I appreciate these very religious, customs of going to a shrine on the New Year's Day. So I will do that too, knowing that this is not my own, religious faith or my own thing, but I enjoy this regardless. Having this distance, having this, recognition of difference and acceptance of the differences. So might be the case of finding a place, comfortable place, or distance that you can take from that, the culture, really.
Okay. Thank you. What is the best way for a non-native Japanese person to become accredited as a therapist or counselor in Japan?
Best way. The licensing is a very questionable issue here. There's a new system. It's called Konin Shindeshi, which is a national license for all psychotherapists and psychologists, and that's a sort of national accreditation thing that's just started 5 years ago, I think. But basically, like if you're overseas trained, if you do an online course overseas, or if you return to your country and do a course and need to come back with that license, you might be able to practice as a therapist because there's no regulation associated with practicing without the license, which is a bit scary. So that gives us opportunities, I guess, but at the same time, like you probably want to go to like websites like IMHPJ, where you can find certified professionals by certain countries, and you can have a choice when you're looking for a therapist. But in terms of practicing therapy, you can basically call yourself a therapist and start practicing with very little. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, it's a tricky thing, because it's a systematic.
But the Konin Shindeshi, that's the main accreditation.
The nationally accredited license, yes. Just before we go, there's one thing that I want to ask you, because I get this from a lot of people who come to our Colourful meetings. Some non-Japanese, well, quite a lot of non-Japanese, and even myself, are find it difficult to distinguish between honne and tatemae, the sort of surface, sort of lacquered over Japanese way of communication. And how can non-Japanese people overcome that, do you think?
I'd ask a question. Clarify. I think it's okay.
It's okay
to clarify by asking questions. It's impossible to read someone's mind. We are not magicians. We are not, we don't have the special magical ability to read people's minds. I think when you're unsure, it's good to ask a question, I think.
And when you're genuine with them, they will be genuine back. I think it works to both ways. I think.
And that improves communication too, between you and your, say, partner, for example. If there are lots of assumptions, and if that's really culturally loaded, you might want to sort of unpack that, and simplify the communication between you and your partner, for example.
Thank you so much for that. I think we've gone over time. We haven't gone over time yet. Okay. How long have we got to go? Oh, okay. So we can talk a little bit more about
Any more questions?
We do have some more questions, but it's very similar to what I asked before. But this person finds the monolith ideology, the sort of conformity in Japan, and the emphasis on suffering and machoism in Japan, suffocating.
Would you like to elaborate what that means?
I guess what the person is trying to say is that you know, in Japan, you don't really, you don't whinge. You don't complain. You don't complain because everyone else is, you know, going through the same thing.
The gaman culture.
Yeah,
right?
the gaman, the doryoku, the nintai.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's a bit sort of imperial Japan kind of thing.
Yeah, it might be a sort of old era Showa period kind of ideology.
But it still exists, right?
Yes, it still exists, but I think people have the humor of quite kind of mocking that culture.
No, but I think the newcomers to Japan still find it, you know, quite difficult to adjust to. I mean, in sort of old style companies, you know, that kind of mentality is still well alive.
Yeah, so work culture is really like, it can be quite toxic, I think. And the idea of, say, you know, working just 8 hours a day and having the work-life balance, that if you carry that common sense and come into the Japanese workforce and kind of assumed, you know, overtime and not even claim it, which is not legal, by the way. So you can talk to somebody like, I think you have a connection to legal.
Legal
Yeah, we have
legal.
Yeah, LGBTQ legal service. So you can go through those people if you are treated unfairly. But yeah, that there's that sort of expectation, perhaps, probably, and that can be quite damaging.
I mean, the first company that I worked for in Japan was very much a sort of, you know, old style, old school Japan, you know, misogynistic.
Yeah. So yeah, it might have been a level of acceptance of that kind of toxic culture in the past, but now it's simply illegal.
It is illegal.
So there's help available. So I just strongly encourage anyone who experiences something like unfair like that to seek help. Yeah.
Emphasis on suffering. There is an emphasis on suffering to a certain level.
Suffering as something good, you mean?
As something that you do in Japan. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe that's the sort of sign of your hard work, sign of your effort, sign of something like a virtue kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a virtue that Japanese people carry, and this particular person finds it a little bit, you know, it's damaging their mental health. Where individualism is not, you know, respected, and what one person is feeling, what this person is feeling is not valued in the community, whereas, you know, suffering with everyone is the virtue in Japan.
Yeah, that group kind of mentality, I guess, the conformity, I think that can be quite challenging. But when it comes to you know, anything to do with work or anything that touches on the legal aspect, I'd encourage, you know, anyone to seek help, and also speak with HR or anybody like a counselor.
If you maybe say if you're a student, what could the person do?
Student, I think depending on what kind of institution that you attend, but in a university, I think the support services have become quite much like there was an improvement in the last year where all, you know, private universities also have to provide the same level of support for those who, you know, mental health and other types of support for, you know, people who have special needs, for example. And it's become mandatory, for students anyway. And only the national universities used to provide those services, but now private universities also have to, you know, catch up on that. So yeah.
So it's just a matter of finding that help?
Yeah, generally, each university has a Hoken center, like health center within, or counseling service. And once you tap into that kind of service, you can probably get more information.
So the help is within your
Help
reach.
is available. Yeah.
Also, some people find it difficult to get the resources in on national health insurance and things like that. Like what insurances they have to pay, what they can, what the health insurance can do, what benefits they can receive from it, like psychiatry. Is that covered by NHI?
Yes.
Okay.
Generally,
in if you go to
see a psychiatrist,
you only have to pay 30% of the medical.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you pay maybe more for the medications.
Medications.
On what you get.
Yeah.
Some of the medications are not covered by the insurance. So.
But there's also the Judician, self-support. I don't know what the Japanese, the English translation is, but a scheme where you can pay less, if like 1%. If you have, if your mental
health issues,
are pretty.
Support.
So
and you can use insurance for the gender-related surgeries.
Okay.
Some with a lot of limitations, but
But there are ways, and there are things that you can.
Unfortunately, hormone treatments are not covered currently, but there's a lot of lobbying from the gender specialists at the moment. So it's hopefully it's going to change soon.
Good. Also, I'd just like to plug the booklet that Colourful Heart made. It's called Colourful Heart's Mental Health Guidebook for LGBTQ expats living in Japan. And it's got a lot of helpful information about what kind of issues there may be, like the things that we've been talking about today, how to find help. Taeko here has written a little column for us. It's really informative. We also have labor and welfare Q&A, which covers.
That touches on the insurance.
It touches on the insurance and the pension and all that kind of complicated stuff. It also has a list of groups and clinics and other resources that you can contact. We will be giving out this booklet to those who bought the donation tickets. So thank you so much for your donation. Much appreciated. We're a non-profit organization, so it means the world to us that you've donated for our cause. And we'll be sending you emails later to ask you for your address, and we'll send you these booklets. If anyone else wants these booklets, please contact us and we'll tell you how to get your hands on them. So we'd like to wrap it up. Thank you so much. Sorry, very, very sorry about the technical issues, but I hope you enjoyed the session. I certainly did. It was very informative and it was very good to sort of clarify a lot of things about mental health issues for LGBTQ non-Japanese living in Japan. So can we just get a final word of goodbye from you?
Thank you so much for the invite this time. I think last time I did a talk at Colourful Heart was about women's, sexual health. And I think there are many issues that need visibility, attention. But this topic is one of that, one of those important issues. And let's keep talking. Let's keep having those, discussion groups and the English groups. And I think, donating to an organization like Colourful Hearts, that's definitely, a big support for the LGBTQ community and for the, pouring in LGBTQ community as well. So yeah, let's keep working on this.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope we get to see you again very soon. Oh, and this video session will be archived. So we'll send out the URL to the link to the video soon. And also we'll be sending out a survey about this session as well. So if you'd like to answer that, that would be so, we'd be so grateful. Thank you so much. Okay, well, until we see you next time,
Okay.
goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Zoom.